Welcome to a new Harry Potter series on this channel. I've been wanting to do this for years, and it was so much fun to finally sit down and do it. In this video, I'm going to point out every single hidden detail and Easter egg in the Harry Potter films, doing it new Rockstar style. Shout out to Eric Voss. We're going to start with the first film in the franchise, the Philosopher's Stone, or if you're from America, the Sorcerer's Stone. I'll show you things that are references to the books and info Rowling came up with after the series ended, things that are meaningful to the production, and anything else I might stumble upon. Get ready to experience the Harry Potter films like you never have before, because we are going deep into Harry Potter lore. So, let's get into it and get started. The first shot of the film shows the street sign of Privet Drive, which is a play on the word private because the Dursleys are so private about their big secret and their relation to the wizarding world. We also see a reddish-brown owl, otherwise known as a tawny owl, perched on the sign, which is a reference to the tawny owl mentioned in the opening chapter that fluttered past the Dursleys' window without any of them noticing. Dumbledore appearing out of nowhere the way he did is also a direct reference to the book, as it said he appeared so suddenly and silently. This is interesting because Rowling made apparating silent in the first book, but from the second book on, it's a loud noise, sometimes being described as a pop and other times as a crack. The object Dumbledore uses to put the streetlights out becomes an important object in the final book, and there we learn that this object is called a deluminator, something Dumbledore made himself. We also see him use this in The Secrets of Dumbledore, and it brought himself and Credence into the mirror world. Looking at the cars in the driveway, this one is a Rover 800 series from 1990, which tells us that the movies don't follow book canon when it comes to the years, because this first scene in the novel was in 1981, so the movies are about 10 years later than the books. This adds up even more, because fast forwarding to 10 years later in the movie, they have a Vauxhall Vectra estate from the year 2000. I like to think that the book canon and the movie canon are two separate Harry Potter universes, because there are just so many differences between the two. So many in fact that in my last Harry Potter series, it took me over 7 hours to go over all of the differences. But I think making these two separate universes should be more widely accepted, because I always see people getting movie and book canon confused, especially in my comment section. McGonagall changing from a cat to a human is the first look we get of an animagus. And yes, that's how you pronounce it according to Rowling, even though the movie said it differently.
An animagus is a wizard who elects to turn into an animal.
Which only adds more fuel to my theory of the books and the films being separate universes, because they even say things differently. But back to McGonagall being an animagus. We know that the process it took to become an animagi is an 8-step process that takes many months, doing all sorts of things, like leaving a leaf in your mouth for a whole month, adding a second heartbeat to yourself when doing an incantation at every sunrise and sunset, and drinking a blood-red potion at the exact moment lightning strikes. So clearly, it's a very long and hard process to become an animagi, so credit to McGonagall. The bike that Hagrid rides on was actually borrowed from Sirius Black, Harry's godfather, who Hagrid had met at James and Lily's house after their deaths. Sirius lent it to him to get Harry out faster, saying he did not need it anymore. And this was hours before he would be framed for the crime Pettigrew had committed that sent Sirius to Azkaban. The blanket that Harry is wrapped in when left on the doorstep was actually kept by Petunia, and after she died, she left it to Harry in her will, something that meant a lot to Harry. The letter that Dumbledore left with Harry housed many important things for the Dursleys, the most important being about why Harry had to live with them. Because Petunia shared the same blood as her sister Lily, who through the power of love had sacrificed herself to save and protect Harry, living with Petunia would keep that protection alive because they share the same blood, even after Lily was gone. This is the first look we get of Harry's scar, and the lightning bolt shape is very interesting. It took that shape because that zigzag movement is the way you cast the killing curse, meaning Voldemort's wand movement basically carved that into Harry's forehead.
That ain't no ordinary cut on your forehead, Harry. A mark like that only comes from being touched by a curse, and an evil curse at that.
10 years later, the shirt Harry is wearing is too big and is very beaten up with a rip in it. And though they never say it in the film, this was because it was a hand-me-down from Dudley, who was obviously much bigger than Harry. And we would continue to see this throughout the film, all of Harry's clothes being too big for him. Also, the tape on Harry's glasses is a nice little detail, because the book of course explained that they were taped because Dudley punched him in the nose so much that they always fell apart. The presents that Dudley got are great details, as you can see the racing bike that he got in the book, as well as the remote control toy, which in the book was an airplane but here in the film is a crane. The blue present right here looks a lot like a VCR, another present that Dudley got in the book, though considering the fact that this is 10 years later, it might be a DVD player or a VHS/DVD player. In the background, you can see a ton of pictures of Dudley and none of Harry, which is exactly how the house was described in the books. You would never know Harry lived there. Looking at the outside of the Dursleys' house, this gives you an idea of what their town Little Whinging was like in the books, where every single house is the same, and the filmmakers even made every car the same, just in different colors. Looking at both the reptile house and the sign for the snake, you can see that this scene takes place in the London Zoo. This actually differs from book canon, because later in the novel, Harry stated while with Hagrid that he had never been to London before, which again shows how these are two separate universes. The snake winks at Harry in both the book and the film, but in real life, this is actually impossible because snakes don't have eyelids. Harry talking to the snake is of course the first time he speaks in Parseltongue, the language of snakes, and is the first indication we get of Voldemort's powers being transferred into Harry when he gave him his scar. This power he gave Harry is one that is also referred to in the prophecy about the two of them, as he shall have power the Dark Lord knows not. That and the power of love, of course. The uniform that Dudley is wearing in the next scene is a school uniform for Smeltings, the private school he's headed off to at the end of the summer, and is also where Vernon went when he was a boy. They also have a nice detail in the background of Petunia dyeing one of Dudley's old shirts gray, which would be Harry's school uniform when he went off to Stonewall High. Vernon mentions Marge.
Oh, Marge is ill at a funny whelp.
Which is of course his sister, who would play a big role in the opening scene for Prisoner of Azkaban. The knights that Harry plays with in his cupboard are the same ones he picks up in the Deathly Hallows Part 1 in that same cupboard 6 years later. We see Hagrid's size and strength as he breaks the door down and bends Vernon's gun, which is of course possible due to his giant blood, as he is a half giant, something we don't find out about until the 4th book. Hagrid using his umbrella to start a fire goes along with Harry's suspicion in the book that his old wand, which had been snapped when he was expelled from Hogwarts, was hidden inside the umbrella, which allowed Hagrid to do magic every once in a while. Looking at Hagrid's line of,
Did you ever make anything happen? Anything you couldn't explain when you were angry or scared?
in the film, we of course saw Harry use magic when he was angry, but we never saw him use magic when he was scared. And what this line is referring to is Harry making himself magically go to the roof of his school when he was running away from Dudley and his friends, his fear kicking in his magical ability. Petunia's dialogue about her sister is the first glimpse we get of her and her younger sister Lily's relationship.
I was the only one to see her for what she was. A freak.
Which we later find out stemmed from jealousy of Lily getting to go to Hogwarts while she couldn't. Petunia even wrote a letter to Dumbledore asking if she could go too, but Dumbledore of course said no. Hagrid says that Harry's had his name down for Hogwarts since he was born.
This boy's had his name down ever since you were born.
This actually traces back to two objects locked away in the castle called the Quill of Acceptance and the Book of Admittance, the things that accept students to Hogwarts. They were made by the 4 founders of Hogwarts and have not been touched by human hands since their creation. So for this video, I am looking at this film so carefully, and I noticed right here, who the hell is that? That is not Hagrid. I don't know how I never noticed that before, but I think it's hilarious. The Leaky Cauldron sign is something I always admired from the filmmakers, because as they walk up to it, there's nothing on the sign, which matches up with what Harry said about muggles just passing it by, not even seeing it. But then as they get closer, the sign recognizes them as wizards and slowly reveals the logo of the pub. This man right here is Daedalus Diggle, and just as described in the book, he has a violet hat. He was a wizard who fought in both generations of the Order of the Phoenix, and long before this, he had seen Harry with Aunt Petunia and Dudley, and he bowed to Harry. And later on in the Deathly Hallows, he was one of 2 people who took the Dursleys away to go into hiding. The man that announces Harry,
Bless my soul, it's Harry Potter.
is the character Tom, the innkeeper of the Leaky Cauldron, who appeared a few more times throughout the series. The menu behind Quirrell is interesting, as it has all sorts of meals, like roast hog, game pie, pickled deal, steak and kidney, and so on. And fun fact, the prop department made each one of those meals, much like the fig food at Hogwarts, but none of these props were ever shown in the movie. Looking at Diagon Alley, there's a lot to go over. I really dug deep into this and did my best Sherlock Holmes impression. I matched up all the shots I had with this map from a book I had lying around, and this shop right here is a secondhand bookshop, the place the Weasleys always shopped, specifically for Ginny when they went to Diagon Alley in the Chamber of Secrets. Next to that in the yellow shop is Florian Fortescue's ice cream shop, and you can even see a witch eating ice cream outside of it. The owner Fortescue gave Harry free ice cream in the 3rd book and helped him with his history of magic homework. And unfortunately, he was eventually captured and killed when Voldemort took over. Next to Florian Fortescue's in the red building is Quality Quidditch Supplies, which has the amazing detail of different Quidditch balls, the Quaffle, the Bludger, and the Golden Snitch. You can see the Hogwarts logo above the shop too, meaning they most likely have the things you need for Quidditch at Hogwarts. Either that or it's an ad for Hogwarts. We see an MM on this woman's bag, which is most likely from Madame Malkin's robe shop, which is right on the left. And this is where Harry and Draco met for the first time in the book, and where most students got their Hogwarts robes. In the window, you can see a turban on the mannequin, which makes you wonder if Quirrell bought his turban here. However, the MM on the bag could also be referring to Magical Menagerie, a shop for magical creatures, which is actually where Hermione bought her cat Crookshanks. And here we get a better look at the shop later in the sequence. The shop next to Quidditch supplies is Scribulus writing implements, which Hagrid and Harry went to in the first book, and the trio returned to in the second book, and which was ransacked by the Death Eaters just before the sixth book. The shop behind that one is Flourish and Blotts, the bookstore where we met Gilderoy Lockhart, and that we returned to several times throughout the series. On the left next to Madame Malkin's is Elop's Owl Emporium, where Hagrid got Hedwig for Harry. In the window of Quality Quidditch Supplies, the orange uniform could be for the Chudley Cannons, because that's the only team whose colors come close to that, though they're a much more vibrant orange in the book. The Chudley Cannons are actually Ron's favorite team, which is quite clear when you walk into his bedroom, as everything is orange. And going back to the window display, the green uniform could either be for the Holyhead Harpies or the Kenmare Kestrels, because those are the only green teams in the league. Looking at the flags to the left of them, there's no more speculation, because I figured out what each one is. The bottom flag is for the Quidditch team, the Ballycastle Bats. The flag above it is the Montrose Magpies, and the top one is Pottermore United, all teams that play in the British-Irish Quidditch League.
Look at it! The new Nimbus 2000!
The Nimbus 2000 is made by the Nimbus Racing Broom Company, formed in 1967 by a man named Delvin Whitehorn, and it was the most elite company for racing brooms. That is, until they were outdone for the first time by the Firebolt broomstick a few years later. To the right, you can also see a sign for Jimmy Kittle's Wonderful Wands, which is another wand shop in Diagon Alley made just for the movie. This shop was not in the books, again adding to my two different universe theory. In Gringotts, you can see cobwebs all over the place, which was not mentioned in the books, but I guess you could say that wizards are the ones who keep things clean, while goblins don't care as much, and they definitely would not trust wizards to come in and clean the place, as they have a not so great history because goblins rebelled at least 2 or 3 times, which led to war between the wizards and goblins. And yes, humans do work at Gringotts, but most of them don't work in the building like Bill Weasley, and the only other humans who work for them are the guards, but they're normally just standing inside or outside the doors, and they obviously would not clean the place. The actor that plays the goblin at the front is Warwick Davis, who plays Flitwick in all of the films, as well as Griphook in the Deathly Hallows. And speaking of Griphook, the goblin that takes them down to the vaults is Griphook himself, who, as I just mentioned, plays a big part in the Deathly Hallows, but here he's played by Vern Troyer, not Warwick Davis. All the money in Harry's vault was of course what James and Lily left him, but how they got that fortune is very interesting. Harry's grandfather, Fleamont Potter, created Magical Sleek Easy's hair potion, which quadrupled the family's gold. This made it so neither James nor Lily had to work after finishing up at Hogwarts, instead dedicating their time to fighting Voldemort with the Order of the Phoenix. The way Griphook opens Vault 713 with his finger is a noteworthy detail, because the lock is designed to suck anyone who does this that isn't a goblin inside the vault, and they only check the vaults every 10 years, meaning you would just die alone in there. When we cut back to Diagon Alley, we see that Harry just bought his school robes as he's walking out of Madame Malkin's robe shop, which is clear because of the scissors over the door. We also see a sign for the Daily Prophet, the main newspaper for wizards, meaning there might be a headquarters for the paper above the shops. And there's even more evidence for this when looking at this view, because it looks like there is a door between Florian Fortescue's ice cream shop and Quality Quidditch Supplies, which would supposedly go up above the shops. I should really have a pipe, because I'm basically Sherlock Holmes right now. Looking at Ollivander's wand shop, it's exactly as the books described it with the peeling gold letters, and the sign even says it was founded in 382 BC, which is a great detail because looking deep into Harry Potter lore, the first Ollivander was believed to have arrived with the Romans, and they changed the game as they replaced the ancient British wizards' crudely made wands with extremely detailed and perfect craftsmanship, and they solidified themselves as the best wand makers in Great Britain even to this day. It's hard to read some of these words because of the way the camera is focused, but this drawer right here says Dragon Heartstring, which refers to the core of the wand, and Dragon Heartstring is one of the most common wand cores. Harry's wand was number 963, which the collectible wands you can buy in real life still puts on the box. The light and wind that goes on Harry when he holds his wand was the wand choosing him, meaning it would work well for him and him only. That is, unless someone disarmed him. Harry's wand core was a tail feather from a phoenix who just so happened to be Dumbledore's phoenix Fawkes.
It so happens that the phoenix
whose tail feather resides in your wand, gave another feather. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother gave you that scar.
What Ollivander is saying here is that Voldemort's wand also housed the tail feather from Fawkes, and this would later cause their wands to create Priori Incantatem when they fought in the Goblet of Fire, which allowed Voldemort's past victims to come out and speak to Harry, which of course included his parents. Hagrid's birthday present to Harry was Hedwig, and the way Harry picked that name was that he saw it while reading one of his school books, A History of Magic. This flashback of Voldemort going to the Potters takes place in the town Godric's Hollow, a small wizarding town named after Godric Gryffindor, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, and this attack took place on Halloween night 1981, but if we're going by film canon, this would have taken place on Halloween 1991. This flashback also has a lot of backstory, as Lily and James trusted their friend Peter Pettigrew to be their secret keeper, meaning no one could find them unless Peter told that person. And that's exactly what he did for Voldemort. He told the Dark Lord where the Potters were. This meant that Lily and James had a false sense of security, and that's why it was so easy for Voldemort. Neither of them had even thought to have their wands handy. The spell Voldemort uses to unlock their door is the spell Alohomora, which we saw Hermione use later in the movie.
Alohomora!
The green light shows us that Voldemort used the killing curse, and that green light was the only thing Harry remembered from the night his parents died. Harry of course survived because his mother sacrificed herself, meaning the power of love made Voldemort's killing curse on Harry rebound and hit him instead, which would have killed him had it not been for his many Horcruxes that kept him alive.
Some say he died. Codswallop, in my opinion. Nope. I reckon he's out there still.
Hagrid was actually spot on with this, because Voldemort was alive and was actually hiding in a forest in Albania.
You're the boy who lived.
This line ties back to the name of the very first chapter in the series. The owl on Percy Weasley's card was Hermes, who his parents had just gotten him as reward for becoming a prefect at Hogwarts. The train they used for the Hogwarts Express was a steam locomotive number 5972 Alton Hall, which you can see from the front of the train. It was built in 1937 and is now famous for being in these films. The Hogwarts Express itself also has an interesting history in the wizarding world, as Adeline Gamble, the Minister of Magic in 1827, made the controversial decision to transport students by train. Before that, kids would ride broomsticks, take enchanted carts and carriages, and some would apparate, which didn't go well considering the school had anti-apparition charms, so they had to go way outside of the castle's grounds. Right here, you can see Neville and his grandmother, Augusta Longbottom, who raised him after his parents were tortured into madness by Bellatrix and a few others. And this is the only time we see Augusta in the films, though we do see her clothes in the 3rd film when on Snape. You can also see Fred and George greeting their friend Lee Jordan on the platform. On the Trolley Witch's trolley, you can see all sorts of candy like chocolate frogs, Birdie Box every flavor beans, Drew Ball's best blowing gum, blood flavored lollipops, pumpkin pasties, what looks like cauldron cakes, and licorice wands. The sandwich that Ron held up was actually a corned beef sandwich, which his mom always forgets he doesn't like, having so many different kids.
Each pack's got a famous witch or wizard. I've got about 500 myself.
Chocolate frog cards are of course collectible in the wizarding world, and it's a great honor to be featured on one. And after the series ended, Harry, Ron, and Hermione all got one of their own. The spell that Fred gave Ron to turn Scabbers yellow obviously did not work, and this is because Scabbers wasn't a rat, he was actually Peter Pettigrew in his Animagus form. Where the train comes in is Hogsmeade Station, which is connected to the wizarding town Hogsmeade next to Hogwarts. They did such a great job with the set because you can see on the benches it says Hogsmeade. Our first look at Hogwarts Castle shows that it's located in the Scottish Highlands. The backstory of this is that Rowena Ravenclaw, another one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, had a dream of a warty hog leading her to a beautiful spot in the Highlands of Scotland, which gave her not only the name for the school named after the warty hog, but also the location of the school. When the camera moves in closer to the castle, you see big windows, which is clearly the outside of the Great Hall. The 4 houses that McGonagall mentions,
they are Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, and Slytherin,
are all named after the 4 founders of Hogwarts: Godric Gryffindor, who I already mentioned, Rowena Ravenclaw, who I already mentioned, Helga Hufflepuff, and Salazar Slytherin, and they built Hogwarts in 990 AD. Draco trying to befriend Harry is something that his father Lucius Malfoy told him to do, as he thought Harry was a dark wizard and that was how he defeated Voldemort. Lucius hoped that one day the Malfoy family could stand behind Harry when he used the dark arts to take over just like Voldemort. But obviously that didn't go the Malfoy's way, did it?
I think I can tell the wrong sort for myself, thanks.
Hermione mentioned Hogwarts: A History.
I read about it in Hogwarts: A History.
This is the same book where Harry got Hedwig's name, and was a textbook written by Bathilda Bagshot, an old woman who lived in Godric's Hollow, the same place where Harry's parents were murdered. She was there for years, even being close to the Dumbledore family when Albus was growing up in the late 1800s. If you remember, Bathilda also made an appearance in the Deathly Hallows, as her body was taken over by Voldemort's snake Nagini. The Sorting Hat has a cool origin. It was a hat that Godric Gryffindor took off his head, and he and the 3 other Hogwarts founders enchanted it, giving it the intelligence of all 4 of them and allowed it to read minds and speak. They made this so that when they were gone, there was still a way to sort students, because at the time, they just handpicked their students. Looking at the teachers at the staff table, other than the ones we actually know, Dumbledore, Snape, Quirrell, McGonagall, Flitwick, and Hooch, the woman next to Dumbledore is Aurora Sinistra, the astronomy professor. The man next to her is Professor Kettleburn, the Care of Magical Creatures professor who would eventually be replaced by Hagrid when he retired. And the woman next to Hagrid is Professor Vector, the arithmancy teacher. And the rest are just extras with no name.
Susan Bones.
The girl that played Susan Bones is actually Chris Columbus's daughter, the director of the first 2 Harry Potter films. McGonagall holding the Sorting Hat for students is interesting, because when she herself was sorted, it took the hat 5 minutes to pick between Gryffindor and Ravenclaw, which is called a hat stall. Another wizard who had a hat stall was Peter Pettigrew, as it was deciding between Gryffindor and Slytherin. In the background, you can see 4 hourglasses, 1 for each house, which counts the points they have. I'm not sure why Hufflepuff's isn't yellow here, but it's clearly yellow in other scenes. Now is a good time to go over the Hogwarts logo, which we've seen several times throughout the movie already. You can see the top right corner is green with a snake, the mascot for Slytherin. The top left is red with a lion, the mascot for Gryffindor. The bottom right is yellow with a badger, the mascot for Hufflepuff. And the bottom right is blue with a raven, the mascot for Ravenclaw. However, this differs from the books because Ravenclaw's mascot in the novels is an eagle, not a raven. And how this makes sense is that raven is a synonym for black, which refers to the eagle's black claws. When the food appears on the tables, many think that Dumbledore magically conjured this food, but one of the main laws of magic is that you can't magically create food. What really happened was there was a kitchen directly below the Great Hall with 4 identical tables. There, the house elves that work for Hogwarts prepare the food and put it on the tables below, allowing Dumbledore to transport that food to the tables above. When Percy says that Snape's been after the Defense Against the Dark Arts post,
but everyone knows it's the dark arts he fancies. He's been after Quirrell's job for years.
The reason Snape was never granted this was because Dumbledore knew that Voldemort had put a curse on the job when Dumbledore said he could not have it, which made every professor that took on the job only last for 1 year. Dumbledore, knowing this, of course did not want Snape to leave Hogwarts, so we kept him on as the potions professor. Let's look at the ghost scene. Here we see Nearly Headless Nick, the ghost for Gryffindor, and he had one of the most gruesome deaths, as it took 45 hacks with an axe to kill him, and his head still didn't come off all the way. The ghost here is the Grey Lady, the ghost of Ravenclaw, and who we later find out is Helena Ravenclaw, the daughter of Rowena Ravenclaw, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts. This ghost is the Bloody Baron, the ghost of Slytherin. The reason he's covered in blood is because of what happened right before he died. He killed Helena Ravenclaw, the woman that he loved, when she refused to come with him. Then, horrified at what he had done, he killed himself, splattering both his and Helena's blood on him. This ghost here is the Fat Friar, who, while living, used his magic to heal the pox on muggles, which made the senior churchmen become suspicious of him, so they executed the friar. Also, again going deep into Harry Potter lore, ghosts in the wizarding world become ghosts because they choose to do so while living, meaning they opt to not go beyond like everybody else, and instead live as a ghost for all eternity, never being able to die.
Once again, my request to join the Headless Hunt has been denied.
Nearly Headless Nick mentioning the Headless Hunt denying him is actually an Easter egg not from the book this film is based on, but from the one after it. There was a whole chapter where they went over the Headless Hunt denying his application because his head was not fully cut off. The many moving portraits are based on a special kind of magic, and their intelligence depends not on the skill of the painter, but on the power of the wizard painted. You can see a portrait of Anne Boleyn, the Queen Consort of England and the second wife of King Henry VIII. Most of the other portraits depict producers, crew members, and even their families. The Gryffindor common room is in a tower of the school, which gives it the circular shape that the filmmakers perfectly depicted. Looking at this shot of Hogwarts, you can see students crossing the viaduct here, which is an early version of the viaduct that's a huge part of the later films and also the Fantastic Beasts films, but there its location had changed. Looking at the chalkboard in McGonagall's classroom, you can see that they're changing a chair into a cat, which seems pretty advanced for the first day of wizarding school. But they also could have been learning the formula below, which takes into account body weight, viciousness, intended transformation, wand power, and concentration. On the other board, we see another transfiguration method, this time separating parts of the object to make it easier to transfigure each individual piece, and it looks like this one takes 3 wand waves. I'm pretty sure that this was all made up by the filmmakers, and I have to say, they did an incredible job. It really does sound like something that Rowling would write. In Potions, Snape says,
"Tell me, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?"
Breaking this down, according to Victorian flower language, asphodel is a type of lily, meaning my regrets follow you to the grave. And wormwood means absence, and also typically symbolizes bitter sorrow. So basically, Snape's first words to Harry are, "I bitterly regret Lily's death," foreshadowing his love for Harry's mother. There's also the mention of a bezoar.
Where, Mr. Potter, would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar?
Which is the exact thing that Harry would use to save Ron from the poison he drank in the Half-Blood Prince. And after that, Snape mentions wolfsbane.
And what is the difference between monkshood and wolfbane?
Which is a potion that keeps a werewolf in their human mind when turning during the full moon, and is what Snape made for Remus Lupin and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Also, looking at the potions classroom, the filmmakers covered the huge windows from the outside to make the room feel as though it were underground, just like in the book, because potions took place in the dungeons of the castle. We get a look at the Daily Prophet, the newspaper I mentioned earlier, and at the top right corner you can see it says the year is 2001, confirming that the film takes place in the 2000s, not the 1990s, and again should be considered a different universe than the books. When Neville's Remembrall turns red, you'll notice that he's the only one without his robes on, everybody else has them on, and that's the filmmakers brilliantly showing that what he forgot was his robes. The flying lessons took place on location at Annet Castle in England, and as did many other scenes throughout this movie. The brooms that they're using for this lesson are from the school Quidditch shed, which the twins said tend to vibrate if you fly too high, and always flew slightly to the left, which might be why Neville struggled so much, but that could also just be because he's Neville.
Why is it always me?
Quirrell's classroom is quite different from the other Defense Against the Dark Arts classrooms, and that's because this was a temporary classroom, because the other one was in the out of bounds area where the Philosopher's Stone was. However, the dragon skeleton is still there just like every other Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. I tried looking for a reason as to why Quirrell was holding an iguana, but after searching for a while, I came to the conclusion that the filmmakers just thought it would look cool. And the same goes for the rest of the stuff in the room, like the bats, the spiky balls, and what looks like a giant hand, which to be fair could be linked to other dark arts items like the hand we saw in Borgin and Burke in the Chamber of Secrets. Even outside the classroom, we see shelves of skulls, again a lot like at Borgin and Burke's. Also, because Oliver Wood is in this class, we know it's a 5th year class, meaning it's OWL year, the test that 5th years have to take. The ghost that nearly headless Nick is talking to here is the Grey Lady, aka Helena Ravenclaw. This sign right here in the hallway is a sign that states the rules, which was put up by the caretaker Filch. In the trophy case, they have a cool little Easter egg showing not only James Potter, but McGonagall too. If we go by the books, there is no other McGonagall that could be connected to this besides Minerva, because the name McGonagall was taken from Minerva's Muggle father. But obviously that information came out years later, so the filmmakers did not know that, so they probably thought they would make this be another McGonagall in Minerva's family. R.J.H. King was another Gryffindor player, and he was made solely for the film. Rowling also sort of ruined this trophy case Easter egg, because she revealed that James was not a seeker, but rather a chaser, and the only reason he had the golden snitch in the flashback was because it was easier to steal and more fun to play with. Also, the plaque behind this one is for special services to the school, and this is one of my favorite Easter eggs in this movie, because that is the plaque that Tom Riddle, aka Lord Voldemort, got when he turned Hagrid in for opening the Chamber of Secrets.
Because I kept burping up slugs over Tom Riddle's trophy. What's the trophy for? He won an award 50 years ago? Special services to the school or something.
The book that Hermione mentions,
Standard Book of Spells, Chapter 7,
was a book written by Miranda Gottschalk, who got her own chocolate frog card for her work on these textbooks. Fluffy the three-headed dog is based on Cerberus in Greek mythology, otherwise known as the Hound of Hades. The bulletin board in the background in the Gryffindor common room is what they use for announcements for things like Hogsmeade trips, Quidditch tryouts, and even the dueling club in the Chamber of Secrets. Seeing the trio climb up the same staircase is interesting, because in the books there are 2 staircases, one that goes to the boys' dorms and one that goes to the girls' dorms, and boys can't climb up the girls' one because it would just turn into a slide and send them flying down. If you look at this case full of Quidditch balls, you can see the 4 house symbols on the front of it. You can also see the Hogwarts logo on the quaffle, which is a cool detail. On each part of the Quidditch stands, you can see the different house colors as well as their mascots emblazoned on it, and I've got to say, these designs are brilliant.
The only thing I want you to worry about is this. The golden snitch.
The golden snitch has a cool history because they used to play with a literal bird called a snidget, which was the same size and moved the same way as the ball. But once these birds were almost extinct because they always died when they caught it, they switched to the ball that we know today, and it was created by a man named Bowman Wright sometime between the 1300s and the 1500s. Flitwick's standing on books is taken straight from the page, as he did this many times in the novels. The idea to put spikes on the troll's legs was actually inspired by the chapter art done by Mary Grandpré, who made every piece of chapter art as well as the American book covers. The pictures they have at Hogwarts all have a hog on the top of it, which of course ties back to Hogwarts, and also the warty hog in Rowena Ravenclaw's dream. During the Quidditch match, you can see McGonagall sitting next to Lee Jordan as he announces the game, which matches up perfectly with the books because McGonagall is always monitoring and correcting what he says. The spell Hermione uses is derived from the Latin word lacerna, a noun meaning cloak, and inflammare is the Latin verb meaning to ignite or inflame. So translating the spell, it says to ignite the cloak. The films never actually explained who gave Harry the invisibility cloak in the letter. It was actually Dumbledore himself, and there's a lot of story behind it. Dumbledore had borrowed this cloak from Harry's father James to inspect it, thinking it was one of the Deathly Hallows connected to the Peverell brothers, the first three owners of the three objects, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and of course the invisibility cloak. As we find out, it was one of the Deathly Hallows, meaning Harry was related to the Peverell brothers, and this cloak had been passed down in the family for generations. Then, unfortunately, James died while the cloak was still in Dumbledore's possession, hence why Dumbledore gave it back to Harry, keeping it in its rightful family. If you pause right before the shrieking book begins to scream, on the left you can see a transcription of a Christian sermon called Of Sincerity Toward God and Man, which was delivered by a man named John Tillotson in 1694. And on the right page you can see another sermon called The Excellency of Abraham's Faith and Obedience, which was preached at Whitehall in 1668 before Princess Anne. Mrs. Norris seeing Harry is something brought up a few times in the books, whether or not cats could see through the invisibility cloak, and that's why she meowed. Looking at the writing of the Mirror of Erised, when read backwards, it says, I show you not your face, but your heart's desire, explaining exactly what the mirror does. If you pause right here and look in the background, you can see the green screen cloth that they used to make the invisibility cloak effect. Here, Harry is wearing a sweater like Ron's, which Mrs. Weasley made for Harry after Ron told her that Harry might not get any gifts. You can again see kids playing out on the grounds if you zoom in on this shot of Hogwarts, which is a very common thing to do when springtime comes around, the season we just transitioned to. With the mention of Dumbledore's defeat of Grindelwald,
Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945. Go on.
This was of course the duel where Dumbledore finally took down the man he loved, Gellert Grindelwald, and the duel was dubbed by many the most epic duel of all time, and is also where Dumbledore won the Elder Wand, another one of the Deathly Hallows.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
Nicholas Flamel was a French wizard who we actually met in the Fantastic Beasts films when we went to France, and he of course had the Philosopher's Stone with him, which was keeping him alive. Hagrid mentions he got the dragon egg in the pub.
I won it. Of a stranger I met down the pub.
The pub he's referring to was actually the Hog's Head in Hogsmeade Village, which is owned by Albus Dumbledore's brother Aberforth. On the table, you can see that Hagrid was reading books about dragons, which in the novel is how the trio found out about the egg. When they saw Hagrid looking at books in the school library, they looked in the section he was in and found it was all about dragons. Norbert the dragon was a Norwegian ridgeback, dragons that are native to Norway, and is a creature that Newt Scamander studied and put in his best-selling book, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. In the Goblet of Fire, we find out from Charlie Weasley that Norbert isn't actually a boy, but rather is a girl, and Charlie Weasley said that they renamed her to Norberta. There's a mention of werewolves in the Forbidden Forest.
And there are werewolves.
Like Draco, many believe that there are werewolves in the forest, and this is sort of true, but also sort of not. Looking deep in Harry Potter lore, there have been two instances in history where two werewolves mated during the full moon, meaning they were both in their werewolf form, and this led to something very curious. The result of their mating was not another werewolf, but rather a litter of wolf cubs. These cubs resemble true wolves in every way, but they are far more intelligent and they do not attack humans. As I said, this occurrence has happened twice in history, and during one of those times, Dumbledore was headmaster of Hogwarts. Dumbledore being Dumbledore, he agreed to let one of the litters be released into the Forbidden Forest. So what Malfoy heard were the now grown-up wolf cubs.
Hello there, friends. See you've met our young Mr. Potter.
Ferenz the Centaur is a character that plays a large role in the series, as he would later be banned by the other centaurs and almost killed had it not been for Hagrid, because he agreed to teach their ways of divination at Hogwarts during Harry's 5th year after Umbridge fired Trelawney. The tune that Hagrid is playing with his flute is the Harry Potter theme song.
Hagrid.
The placement of this flute is also a nice Easter egg, because in the book, Hagrid gave Harry a flute for Christmas, and this is what Harry used to calm Fluffy down when they went through the trapdoor. On the chalkboard in McGonagall's office, you can see it breaks down meddling man to monkey, which is a transfiguring spell that turns a human into a monkey. The spell Hermione uses,
Petrificus Totalis,
is the full body bind curse, also known as the body freezing spell. The first obstacle with the Devil's Snare was created by Professor Sprout, the herbology teacher, hence why it's a plant that tries to stop them. The flying key obstacle was created by the charms professor Phileas Flitwick, and the chessboard was made by McGonagall as she transfigured the statues to come to life, just as she had done during the Battle of Hogwarts.
I've always wanted to use that spell.
If you pause here, you can tell that this is not Rupert Grint, but it's actually a stunt double, and same for when he first hits the ground. Again, going deep in Harry Potter lore, when Quirrell put Voldemort on the back of his head, he became Voldemort's 8th Horcrux without either of them even knowing. Also, about how Quirrell and Voldemort became one. Quirrell had been studying abroad in a forest in Albania, which, as I mentioned earlier, was where Voldemort went into hiding. There, he met Voldemort's decaying self, and the Dark Lord manipulated Quirrell, making him agree to morph their bodies. As the movie explains, the reason why Quirrell and Voldemort could not touch Harry is because of his mother.
She sacrificed herself for you, and that kind of act leaves a mark. It lives in your very skin.
What is it?
Love.
But as I said when going over the letter, it's also because Dumbledore kept that protection going by having Harry live with Petunia. It keeps that protection alive. The thing that came out of Quirrell's body after he died is all that's left of Voldemort. That's all that the Horcruxes were able to keep when he was hit by the rebounded killing curse. In the background, you can see Madame Pomfrey, and she might not be recognizable because she was recast in the next film, but that is supposed to be her. The kids wearing hats at the final feast is actually what they're always supposed to be wearing in the books. It's not just for special occasions. The film of course had them wear it for the shot of the kids throwing their hats in the air, which is actually one of my favorite shots in this whole movie. The final scene takes us back to Hogsmeade Station, which, as I said, is connected to Hogsmeade Village, the town next to Hogwarts. This scene was also the very first scene and the very first day that they started shooting for the Harry Potter films. The book that Hagrid gave Harry was full of photos of his parents, and though we only saw one in the film, Hagrid had reached out to all of James and Lily's old friends, gathering so many photos, one of which depicted Sirius Black standing next to James as his best man at his wedding. And there you have it, every single Easter egg from the first film. It was so fun diving deep into this movie, more than I ever have before, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like to help with the algorithm, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss the next video in the series, as I dissect the Chamber of Secrets. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. You can follow me on Instagram to see more of my personal life, like my cute dog Loki, and some behind the scenes movie flame stuff. I also do similar content on TikTok and Twitter that I do here on this channel, so if you like what I do here, check them out. All the handles are right below me, and links are in the description. Over here are my wonderful patrons. If you want to be featured on the next video, plus get a few other perks, become a patron today. As always, if you liked the video, hit that like button and subscribe, and look out for more great movie flame videos on the way.